for some talented musicians. And so I'm going to turn it over to Michael and Francis, and we're so excited. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And let me add my gratitude to you and also to Temple community for having allowing us to have this little to share our music. I'm Francis Wong, for those of you who don't know me, and my wife Yumi and I have been part of the Sangha for quite a while. In fact, our kids are, Tenjo and Megumi, they grew up, they basically grew up in the temple, so, and we're in Dharma school. You can't hear?
Can everybody hear?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Okay. When I do the spoken word piece, I'll use the microphone. So, and I'm also grateful to Michael, my esteemed colleague. Esteemed, but a little bit wet.
A little bit, only a little damp still.
Who came in from Pennsylvania, Lancaster, and who has been very supportive of my efforts to write music for the violin. As some of you know, I'm known as a saxophone player and a jazz in the jazz field. But one of the things that I've wanted to do, because I did study violin as a kid, and I always kind of felt that I didn't necessarily see myself in the musical literature as a Chinese American. And so I enjoyed the Mozart, the Mendelssohn, the Bach, everything, but I thought something maybe was a little missing. And I also learned that it does make a difference for young musicians to see people who look like them. And maybe among other factors, but it's been very clear. I'm going to be 67. 67? Yeah, 67 in a couple months, and so I've lived long enough to see that, and enough young Asian Americans have come up to me and says it matters that I'm playing music at all, and or I'm also a professor at San Francisco State, so it matters to young people, and so having pieces of for violin written that have an Asian American, come from an Asian American place, because there's no such thing as sounding Asian American necessarily. So, but the idea that that we have a cultural heritage, and that I'm old enough to be part of our cultural heritage. So, with pride and humility, of course. So what we're going to do is I've written up some program notes so that we'll proceed with the first half of the program, the first 6 pieces. Michael's going to play them in sequence, and so you don't have to listen to too much talking at this point. Well, thank you. So let's welcome Michael Germanis. Let's give him a warm Wasn't that kind of amazing?
Wasn't that kind of amazing?
To see the violin played in so many different ways, you know.
It's a great instrument. I'm a little biased, but I always wanted to be a saxophone.
So what we're gonna do now is actually a large part of our relationship, our friendship over the years is this idea of dialogue between musics. And you know, my background is mainly in African American music, jazz, improvisation is a large part of my musical language is that I delve into. Although you know, I did have training, like I mentioned before, in classical music. So what we've done over the years is actually then tried to have a dialogue between Michael's really vast knowledge of this music for the violin and European classical music with the spirituals, the blues, and well, mainly this thing about improvisation. And what's been really great to see is that we can all, both of us, you know, we're a little long in the tooth, well, me a little bit longer, that we could change and develop, you know, later in life. And so, I don't know, you want us to say something about improvisation? This is an improvisation here, so.
I'm just gonna say he taught me everything I know. No, I think for me, getting to know Francis back in like 2013, I think we met, and then 2014 we went on a chamber music retreat, a music creative retreat together, and I really, my eyes were like blown wide open by the possibilities. So, and ever since then, it's just been, I've been able to find more of my voice through the improvisation. So, and now I teach it to my students. And by the way, I do teach a lot of those pieces to my students. They learn it in a different way, but they're very adaptable through many different levels. You can make them really difficult, but you can kind of simplify them. And so that in itself is improvisation right there. So it's kind of, it's permeated my life, like in my classical music too. So it's been great for that.
Yeah, so a lot of the Michael playing some of my compositions, because my compositions really reflect my improvisational language, you know, along with my, you know, the stuff that I grew up with. So, and because of my interest in becoming a composer was piqued by, because I was baptized down the street at St. Dominic's Church, and my godfather was the organist, but he was also a composer. So when I was little, he came over and he brought a published composition, and I said, "Oh, this is pretty cool." So, so the ability to kind of this idea of encoding our values into works of music, and to have a sense of the legacy that, you know, but also a legacy that's, as we work together, is this idea that it's flexible, you know. In some ways, it's kind of like a modern idea of, you know, like software applications and things like that. You know, so that's some of my early training, but also my brother is he's a software engineer, so it's kind of like, but he played the trombone, so we kind of grew up playing music together. So this idea of like the music is a vehicle for us to realize the world that we envision is kind of the thing. So we're going to continue. So we're going to kind of get an example of our ongoing dialogue by playing this series of things.
Francis, you need the mic when you talk.
Okay.
Thank you.
Michael's also a producer. Untangling chords.
Always. After I've worked for 25 years in classical music, it's okay. This is great. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Okay, so we're gonna play Sorrow, which is
basically a song of relief, and it's part of our times.
It's okay. Yeah, I can hand out.
And now for the rap portion. 1927, when I was 6 years old, I traveled with 4 of my sisters from Guangzhou, Republic of China, in a steamship to the island nation of Mauritius. Mauritius, then a British colony, was almost 5,000 miles away. We were sent away because my mom died in the Pearl River trying to escape a fire on a ferry boat. And my dad decided he could not take care of all of us. My eldest brother and sister stayed behind. Dad had been born in Mauritius, actually, but that is a long story. I was met there by my grandmother and 2 aunties. They kind of looked Chinese, like my father, but they did not speak my language of Cantonese. They only spoke French. I only spoke Cantonese. I cried so much. We lived in a village compound where my grandmother and my aunties helped with the Catholic Church. They ran an outdoor school and a medical clinic. Most of the people who lived there were Black African. My grandmother was considered Creole, as she was a mix of Chinese and French ancestry. I eventually could speak French and English. Mauritius had been a French colony before the British took over and was largely a Francophone culture. We were very poor. I did not really understand, as our dad had a very successful business in China. I even worked as a child. I learned how to be a sewing woman, doing piecework. I remember us having a feeling that we had been abandoned. Nevertheless, I had fun and happy moments. The weather could be very beautiful. The beaches were clean, and the sand was quite warm. It was very relaxing at times. It was also exciting to ride on the giant tortoises. I also had a pet monkey named Munyuk. Oh, how playful and mischievous he was, grabbing my food and running off. And of course I would run after him, pretending to scold him. As I got older, I found out that I could learn. Somehow I was able to learn bookkeeping. I was quite a sight as I took the certificate exam when I was only 12 years old with all of the adults. This and other skills would mean I could have a job during the war and after. Even though I was young, I was put to work teaching in the church school. I taught arithmetic and reading to our neighbors. Our neighbors were great and we all got along. However, even though we lived together in the compound and my family served everyone in the community, we were not to mix. My best friend was a black African girl, and I was told not to be her friend. I did not follow what I was told. I did not go for it. I enjoyed the social life in the public square, the plaza. Often, pretty much every week, our neighbors would play their drums, dance, and sing. I will always remember that music. I really enjoyed the food we had. Lots of fruits, lots of bananas, mangoes, and breadfruit. Also the chilies for spicing the food. But you could just eat them raw off of the plant. My aunties would say, "How can you do that? Those are really hot." They told me that I must not be a sensitive person because I could stand the heat. I would just laugh. One year, though, I got very sick with malaria. Those mosquitoes, oh, I suffered. I remember crying every moment for my aunties to give me the quinine medicine to help me. I even had hallucinations. I eventually got well, but they say it stays with you as long as you live. Most of all, I loved my sisters. We all had pretty French names. I was Noella. There was Celestine, Brigitte, Nora, Rose. We got along well, which really helped when life was hard, which was all of the time. And it got even harder when the war came. In 1939, a big war was going on in Europe. China was already at war with Japan, although my dad was now in the British-held Hong Kong. So strangely, as so-called British subjects in this island paradise, we were pretty unaware of what it all meant. My dad decided to bring us sisters back to Hong Kong, leaving my grandmother and aunties behind. He had started a branch of the Dutch Friesland brand and figured out how to sell dairy products like sweetened condensed milk and ice cream to Chinese people. He had decided that he did not want us to marry anyone in Mauritius. We will always be connected to Mauritius. When my sisters and I got to Hong Kong, I could speak French and English, but no longer could speak Cantonese. I would have to figure out how to be a proper Chinese. How do you do that? I would relearn the language and ways in Hong Kong. But the war was coming. I would, with my family, become refugees. and also in our own way, we would join the fight for our country. How about that improvising over there? So just wanted to note that today is my late father's birthday. He would have been 103. And he had passed away actually not quite 2 years ago, in August of 2022. So anyway, so this piece is about my father's journey. I did my mom, so yeah. George leaves home. I just could not stand it anymore. I had to do something. I would leave Tinsen, occupied by the Japanese imperial forces, and join the Republican resistance in Chongqing over 1,000 miles away. I lived with my parents in the British section in Tinsin. While it had not been a picnic living under the occupation, we had it better than most. My dad, everyone called him either Willie or Wong Wei, was into different kinds of business. He ran the International Horse Racing Club and track before the war. He somehow convinced the Japanese to let him reopen the track with the support of local Japanese and Chinese investors. He hoped to provide a source of entertainment and employment for the city suffering under the occupation. A lot of businesses were shut down, a lot of people were out of work. I was doing what I could for the resistance by joining the underground movement. My friends, some of whom had joined the communists, passed intelligence about the Japanese military and sometimes were involved in more overt acts, including assassinations. There was one legendary young woman who apparently had killed a suspected collaborator in a movie theater during the screening of an American gangster gunfight scene. Or so the story went. For my part, I would pass messages sewn into my pants or jacket lining. I did have a close call as I was stopped at a checkpoint on my bicycle by the Japanese military police, and they searched me. I somehow stayed calm and they let me go. Maybe my poker playing days with my friends at the racetrack helped me. Ironically, those times hanging out around the track with my dad are my fondest memories. I was the eldest child. And as a young man in my early 20s, my dad thought of me following in his footsteps. The part I loved most was going to the cafe with him to drink coffee and have bacon and eggs with me tagging along. Then I would help him tend the horses, including what's called breezing the horses. My best lessons in life came on those early morning rides. Breezing is a way to exercise the horses in training for a race. We would sometimes work two at a time, my dad in the lead and me following. I would be trained in addition to the horses. I was so excited when I got a chance to ride in a real race. When Dad rode in a race around the last turn, heading to the finish line, people would yell, "Here comes Wong Wei!" I was so proud when they said after my first race, "George looked a lot like Wong Wei out there." In spite of these nice moments, I was so sad when I constantly heard on the radio about the 24-hour-a-day bombing of Chongqing, the capital of the Chinese resistance. I myself witnessed from our rooftop the bombing and shelling of Tianjin during the invasion, and years earlier during the first assault on Shanghai. Then I heard about this American named Chenault and a group of pilots and ground crew called the Flying Tigers. The these volunteers, they were actually mercenaries who were former US military, South America, were helping to stop the Japanese bombing, challenging the Japanese Zeros, their elite fighter aircraft. With US surplus and somewhat obsolete P-40s for control of the skies above Chongqing. Chenault was given credit for devising innovative tactics that gave the normally outperformed P-40s an advantage. The Flying Tigers eventually were part of the US military mission to China when the US joined the war after Pearl Harbor. And so I had to go. I would somehow make that 1,000-mile journey to Chongqing. The Flying Tigers and the Americans were making a difference, and so could I hoped. My mom and dad were so sad. My younger sister, who joined the student movement against their wishes, would eventually also leave, going to Yan'an to join the communists. To be continued.
Okay, so this is going to be the last piece. And thank you so much for your attention and good feeling here. Michael Germanis? And we're going to play something